Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just got into a couple of players and coaches that are under a ton of pressure going into this weekend, and I think the two biggest ones I think the two biggest ones are those quarterbacks in that big time game in Austin. Both those guys could very well become the number one overall pick on Saturday. So definitely an incredible game to watch over there. But let's get into a couple of games that we just haven't had a chance to get to preview this upcoming weekend. But there's been football already this week. So let's go ahead and jump in here and let's start with that Western Kentucky Sam Houston State game. A very, very interesting one that Sam Houston was favored in going into this game, and Western Kentucky just took it to them. They are playing really, really good football, are the second betting favorites in the Conference USA right now, right behind Liberty. Caden Veltkamp is playing really, really good football. 20 for 29, 281, 3 touchdowns for the Hilltopper quarterback, and he's playing awesome, awesome football. One of those guys that definitely could lead them to a Conference USA title. And then on the other side, Hunter Watson was playing awesome football in the first half of this game, and then he went down. And Jesse Bauer took over in the second half, and that's really where everything kind of went off the rails for Sam Houston. It was 17-14 WKU at halftime, and then you see the final score. So you absolutely hate it for them. Obviously, it's going to be a very interesting finish to the season in the Conference USA, Liberty being the team that's definitely setting the pace, but Western Kentucky, a dangerous squad that could possibly kind of trip them up here. And then I wanted to touch on this one very quickly because this is the first UTEP win in 357 days. So just wanted to give a very quick shout out to Scotty Walden and all of the guys down there because that is crazy. And they really, really enjoyed it. Very, very cool scene. And the star of the day was the UTEP running back, Javon Jackson. Played really, really good football. 148 yards, 5.7 yards per carry, and a score on the ground. Very talented kid. And he's one of those guys that, unfortunately, probably is getting some eyes from some bigger programs right about now. And then in this game as well, FIU played 3 different quarterbacks through 28 passes and 4 interceptions. That's one of the more remarkable things I've seen. That's absolutely crazy that you can be that inept throwing the football. And then they had 85 yards rushing and 2.6 yards per carry. So frankly, I don't even know how they got to 21 points. But at the end of the day, a rough day for FIU and a huge win for UTEP for the first time in almost a calendar year. And then we had this one last night, and it got a little bit weird there for a second, didn't it? There was a third quarter that Virginia Tech very, very much wants to forget because you're up 28-0 going into halftime. Everything's rolling right along. Byshell Tutin's doing incredible things. And then you come out in the third quarter, turn the ball over twice. Boston College outscores you 21-0, and you're thinking, this one could get sketchy quickly. And then Virginia Tech's able to pull away towards the end of this game. Virginia Tech, Byshall Tutin's remarkable. If you have not watched this kid play football yet, tune in because he is so much fun to watch. 18 carries, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, and also just added a receiving touchdown just for the fun of it. The dude is absolutely remarkable, and as of right now, he is an all-ACC player at running back, doing incredible, incredible things, and from a lot of different games this season has been the entirety of the offense for Virginia Tech. So a huge win for Virginia Tech there. Definitely love to see them, and they're an interesting team going forward. But talk about this game. Gross. That's the best word I got for this one. I'll be totally honest with you guys because this one's going to be really, really weird tonight. And one of the things to talk about going into this game, which is kind of funny, is there's a tradition around Florida State, which is if you're an underdog on the road and you win that game, you take a little bit of sod from the opposing field and you take it back to Florida State and put it in a little garden over there. Florida State fans do not want them to do that in this game. They do not want them to do it against Duke because they don't feel Duke is worth that tradition. And I tend to agree with them. I don't necessarily think that's all that great of an idea. Now, to be totally fair, it's a tradition. I don't necessarily care about what the other team is, but I get where the fans are coming from on that one. If they don't bring Sod back, I wouldn't be too upset, but is it a Sod game or not will be a very interesting storyline going into this one. And then Duke's just trying to get back on track after that tough loss to Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago. And then Florida State, I think with Brock Glenn, has found just a little bit of something. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be lighting the scoreboard on fire. I think he's giving them a little bit more. I do like Florida State in this game. As crazy as that sounds, it always sounds crazy to pick Florida State in a game at this point, but I am going to pick Florida State to get the win and at the very least get to 2 wins on this season. And then you got Kentucky, Florida. This is a very funny game for so many reasons because Kentucky trying to get that bounce back after the Vanderbilt loss, Florida doing the exact same thing after the Tennessee loss. And the interesting thing with this one is DJ Lagway will be the starting quarterback because Graham Mertz is out. Hate to see it for Graham Mertz, a very talented player that, frankly, if he was in that Tennessee game the whole time, I think Florida might have won, but that's beside the point at this point, obviously. For Kentucky, I think it's fair to say they missed their shot this year. The same way last year, you bring in a transfer quarterback and things just don't fully click the way you want it to. And you hate to see it, but at the end of the day, they are going to be a problem for a number of people throughout the rest of their schedule. I know they have Texas still on the schedule. I know they have a number of other big games. They're going to be a problem, and they're going to be a team that I would not be surprised at all if they won one of those big games down the road. But this is going to be an interesting one, and I think the biggest thing I'm watching here is how does DJ Lagway handle this Kentucky defense? Because very well called by Brad White, an elite defensive line up front, and he's going to be under fire quite a bit. This is going to be a great moniker for just how good he's going to be going forward for Florida or hypothetically for another program. But we can get there when we get there. Definitely a lot to happen around Florida over the next couple of months. And then we got Iowa, Michigan State, a game that, frankly, the over-under is at 39.5. Iowa scored 40 points last week, so you might just want to take the over just basis off Iowa scoring 40 because this offense seems to be kind of humming right now, which sounds just insane to say. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch this game unfold. Aiden Childs is someone I want to watch in this game because this is a very, very good defense. Phil Parker is incredible at making life just genuinely impossible for quarterbacks. If Aiden Childs can play at least an okay game, I feel like you feel pretty confident going forward as a Michigan State fan. And then I think Caleb Johnson just continues to roll in this one. So talented, probably the second best running back in the country right now. And I think Aiden Childs gives them just a couple more possessions. So give me Iowa in this game. But Anthony, you know how Billy Napier is on the hot seat in Florida this year. If they continue to lose badly, that is an interesting question. Is Mike Norvell on the hot seat if this continues to roll downhill the way that it has? I tend to say no. I do think there is an ability for at the end of the season for those conversations to start happening to say, what happens if we go 8-4 next year? What is the moniker going into 2025? But I think they're going to give him a shot to right the ship. I think he's earned a shot to right the ship with the season that he had last year. Now, to be totally fair, I've talked about this on here a little bit before. Righting the ship is not going to be all that easy because it's not necessarily about the way that they go about business on the football field or anything like that. The coaching staff, their roster building is wrong as far as I'm concerned. I think they need to lean away from the portal and towards a high school recruiting. Problem is their high school recruiting class is kind of crumbling right now. So if they don't figure that out in a hurry, they're going to have to go back into the portal and then just hope that those guys hit. So they're in a very murky situation. I think Billy Napier will get at the very least a year to prove that he is still the guy around there. But at the end of the day, you keep losing. You lose to a number of teams coming forward. You lose to Kentucky this weekend. You get dominated by Texas. You get dominated by Georgia. I'm sorry, I'm talking about Billy Napier. If Mike Norvell, if you go down the stretch and he doesn't necessarily play all that great of football, they lose some games that they're not supposed to, there will be rumblings. I can absolutely promise you that, and he will be walking into 2025 on absolute thin ice. But I think Norvell's going to get one more year. At the very least, I think he's going to get one more year, but I don't think it's going to be an easy thing to fix in 1 year. Absolutely. I think the over-reliance on, I think that's really across the country. If there's any program that is overly reliant on the transfer portal, they can find a year here and there. No two ways about that. There's an ability to pop any given year like Florida State showed us last year, but it's very easy to miss. And you have to be able to recruit high school, and it's going to be an interesting fight. There's no two ways about that. I do think Mike Norvell gets one more year, but I don't necessarily think he gets much more than that if they can't put on a good product, and it's probably going to have to be transfers out there. So we'll get into that throughout the rest of the season. It's one of those that he's going to have to change his ways pretty quickly and get this thing right, because if he doesn't, I can almost promise you that anything below 8-4 next year is him getting kicked out the door. I feel very confident in that. I think he's earned at least one more year, but Florida State fans are a little bit active, so maybe they'll run him out the building. But that definitely will be an interesting thing to watch, and one of those things that I just can't quite get a beat on as of right now. But another game to watch in the late night slate. Wanted to make sure you guys had some for the insomniacs out there. But UNLV, Oregon State, going to be an incredible game. UNLV trying to get back into the fight here. Losing that game to Syracuse. I totally blanked there. Losing that game to Syracuse was obviously a huge blow to their schedule, but the reality is, you run the table, I still feel very good that this could be the CFP team in the play, or the G5 team in the playoff. Granted, if Army and Navy run the table, that's a totally different conversation. But UNLV is still very much in the hunt. I think UNLV's defense is very, very solid. I think they're one of those teams that you focus on the offense so much that the defense goes a little bit unnoticed. Didn't play all that great against Syracuse, but didn't necessarily expect that against Syracuse, to be totally fair. So Oregon State was just bad against Nevada. Giovanni McCoy threw 4 picks. They gave up 353 yards rushing. I think UNLV kind of takes care of business in this one and just absolutely rolls. And then TCU, Utah. I will answer this question in 2 seconds, Anthony, but this is kind of a weird one for TCU and Utah. You have Isaac Wilson on one side starting his game for Utah, taking over for the injured Cam Rising. TCU just kind of reeling right now, trying to find their way to at least a good season at the end of the day. I think I'd lean TCU here. It's a very, very weird game. It's one of those that I don't necessarily love one way or the other, but at the end of the day, actually, you know what? Change my pick. I lean Utah here because TCU allows over 200 yards rushing. I think Micah Bernard could just win this game for him outright. But let me get to these questions from Anthony here for a second. I'm a Hurricanes fan, so I'm wondering if we continue to win close games in the conference committee. That is an interesting question. If they end up running the... So I'll put it this way. If Miami runs the table, they could win by 1 point for the rest of this season. They will be in one of those bye spots. There's no doubt in my mind. Now, if they do stumble in one of these games, lose one, and then kind of have a weird end of the season where it is some of these games where they're having to come back in, maybe there is a little bit of an opening. I tend to believe a lot of people, we kind of want that craziness of a G5 team getting one of those byes. I think it's going to be really hard for that to happen, but, there is some openings to possibly be happening, and Miami would be one of those. So definitely something to watch there. No two ways about that. So I think it's going to be interesting. It's a fight between those two things. And then Peter seems how they're setting it up as if there's one loss SEC team or a Big Ten team, they would put them in over the top 4. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I do think it's one of those battles between, I guess the best way to put it is, if you have those Power 5 programs, if none of them have totally bought, frankly, I think if the conference champions are anything better than a 3-loss team, they're probably getting those buys. As much as, you could argue Boise State or UNLV or one of those teams should possibly get one of them, I don't necessarily think that's a reality. I think it maybe should be. I think that's a conversation that we can absolutely have. But I think when you get into that room with those CFP, the commissioner and that group, I think it's going to be really hard to sell those Power 4 conferences not getting those buys. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about that too much. If Miami wins the conference, I feel very confident that they're going to be the team. The big question is, what happens at the back end? Is a 3-loss SEC team better than a 2-loss ACC or a 1-loss Big 12? That'll be a very interesting question. But overall, everyone talks about the G5 teams possibly getting one of those buys. I think that would be a lot of stuff would have to happen for that to happen. So I wouldn't worry too much as a Hurricanes fan. I wouldn't worry too much about them possibly losing that spot. But at the end of the day, a lot of really fun games this week. One game that I didn't get to get a graphic done for, but South Dakota State plays North Dakota State this upcoming weekend in the FCS. Incredible. Tune into that one. Going to be really, really fun. I forgot to make a graphic for it. I apologize to the FCS. They deserve more respect. But at the end of the day, huge game. Cannot wait for that one. But let's take our third break here. And when we come back, let's get into my best bets for the weekend. I have a couple that I feel really good about. And frankly, I feel bad that I feel really good about them. But we'll get into them right after this, so stick with us.